What door did Rick close? Because aren't you in your dining room?
Yeah, we have doors in our dining room. This is a 115-year-old house.
Brag.
So there are actually rooms with doors.
Looks a little bit like the house in the movie.
I know, I was thinking
that house is awesome.
Yeah, I was like that was my main takeaway from Hereditary was interior decorating ideas for my house. I was like, oh man, I got to get that wall. I got to paint my walls that color.
I was going to ask you, Rick, if you had been up in your attic since you watched the movie too, because it definitely looked familiar.
It definitely.
It's small. Yeah, your attic is bigger.
Yeah,
but it looked almost exactly the same.
There's no headless relatives in my attic. There was a weird smell in the house today.
All right, welcome to Lost and Found and Rewound, where one of our hosts refused to watch the new Netflix Dahmer bio series. One of our hosts is likely not aware of the series because it was not produced by the BBC. And one of our hosts was delighted to discover that the third Human Centipede film, Final Sequence, which he hasn't seen yet, was directed by Tom Six, the director who helmed the first two Human Centipede films. I'm Chris Lost.
I'm Found Jim.
I'm Rick Rewound. And you're Hot Mike.
Was that how I was supposed to introduce myself?
No, that's not how you introduce a guest.
Feel violated.
I'd like to welcome the folks who have recently started listening to the show. Once again, our listenership has dramatically increased well after the conclusion of the show, so thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you. Here on Lost and Found and Rewound, you'll discover we are nothing if not committed to our special promises, and today we are making good on what I think, but am struggling to verify, is our final special promise. So today we are doing our Exorcist III versus Hereditary episode with special guest Michael McLost. And I've got more to say about the nature of this special itself, but first let's turn our attention to our guest. See, that's how we're gonna, I wrote something there to introduce him there.
When you hear it a certain way, special promises feels a little weird.
That's why they call it writing, Michael. It was written that way. Michael, welcome back. See, I have more.
Thanks for having me.
Michael, welcome back.
Oh.
Thank you for joining us again. Are you prepped and ready for this very special promise we've made to the Lost and Found and Rewound community?
Yeah, let's do this.
So we'll start today's episode with our guest-centric segment entitled Starlit Embarrassment. Michael, when you were last here, you shared your tale of Kim Kardashian. Could we get you to share one of my favorite stories of yours, the tale of when you were working out in the WB gym with a particular friend, another embarrassing starlet tale.
Was this embarrassing?
The WB story?
Yeah.
You don't remember the story?
I don't remember what's embarrassing about it. I mean, there's a lot of stories from the WB gym where I once worked out and where my friend Chris Lost once worked out. Like the time that he got yelled at because he never wiped down his benches after sweating profusely. And then when a lady complained about it, he went, "So what? If you're not sweating, you're not working out right."
Wow.
It's a good argument.
And that was embarrassing. Was that the embarrassing story?
No. This is when you were working out with a particular friend.
I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I'm sorry, Chris.
That's all right. We'll strike that.
Bring me back in. I wish it's. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. I just don't remember the story.
Michael, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Are you prepped and ready for this very special promise we've made to the Lost and Found and Rewound community?
I am. This was a special promise that I think was first made on the Midsummer episode that I did, but the kernel of the discussion, I think, has existed longer than that between me and Chris Lost, which we can cue that up later, the proposition of the debate between these two movies. But last time I was here, I remember we chatted about movies that we've watched recently, so I've got some movies here too if you want to do that.
Let's do that. Let's do a few movies you watched recently, and then I do want to say something about the kernel of this episode.
Great. So as a listener, what movies have you guys watched recently?
I forgot about this part. But as usual, I can't, I don't think I have really watched anything in the past month or so.
Did you watch the films for this episode?
Yes, I did.
Rick, have you watched any films lately?
Yeah, I watched White Noise. Watched Emily the Criminal.
I did too.
Banshees of, how do you pronounce it? Inisherin.
I just watched that last night. What did you think?
I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. I think I liked it.
I loved it. It did break me, but I loved it. I mean, it is the most Irish movie you're ever going to watch. But everyone is so good in it.
It is, yeah.
Colin Farrell just continues to be an actor that I underestimate every time, and I should stop betting against him because he is brilliant in everything that he does. And I would say I've only seen half of his movies. There are a lot of his good movies that I haven't seen.
Yeah. I watched In Bruges again after that, and that's a long time ago. And he was great in that. And then The Lobster and the Killing of the.
I need to see those too. I've never seen those.
Yeah. I have the exact same feeling about him, where it's just like, wow, he is so great.
Yeah, I think the problem was when he came on the scene back in the early aughts, and he was getting big movies like Minority Report really fast, and he was running around with Britney Spears. I kind of just wrote him off as he's just a flash in the pan party boy, but he's got the goods, and he's so great in Banshees of Inisherin. I like all those people are. Brendan Gleeson's amazing. The actress who's from Better Call Saul is terrific, and Rome. I wish I remembered her name off the top of my head. But yeah, I really loved that movie. I watched it last night, and it is sad. It's funny, but it's also very sad.
I am particularly sensitive to what do they call it, hand trauma, and so that's the one thing that was difficult for me to. Not spoiler alert.
There's a little hand trauma in the film. That's all we'll say, and it's wild.
Wild hand trauma.
Wow, I shouldn't have made you watch Sharky's Machine then.
Oh yeah, I think I probably talked about that during Sharky's Machine. Yeah.
I watched Avatar: The Way of Water recently.
Yep, me too.
How was that?
It was 40 minutes too long. It was a delightful cinematic experience. I do not regret going to see it. I will say it was a good film. I enjoyed it. I probably would never watch it again. Just like the recent Batman movie. It's like they need to cut these films down.
I disagree about the comparison with the recent Batman movie, but go on.
You don't think there was 40 minutes too much of water action in the Batman film and in the Way of Water?
This is great. I love this because this actually gets to... This is going to cue us up later for the conversation that we're going to have between the two movies for today. I like that because there's one extended water scene in the Batman that's a too long movie, you immediately compare it to the new Avatar film.
Which had an extended water scene that could have been cut from...
The whole movie's a water scene.
Well, I'm talking about the last 40 minutes where they redid the last, 40 minutes of The Abyss in the last 40 minutes of Avatar: The Way of Water.
Well, wasn't The Abyss, it was Titanic.
Titanic, Abyss. I mean, there's always some sinking thing where people have to keep their head above the water so they can breathe. And
I think Avatar is probably too long, but I will say this. The difference between that movie and The Batman is The Batman is a 3-hour movie with still confusing plot lines and character beats that don't work and things where you're like, how is this movie 3.5 hours long and it still feels like there's parts of the movie missing?
Yeah.
Whereas Avatar: The Way of Water, it's all there. There's no beat in the story that you feel like, oh, I didn't get this. I didn't understand why this character did this. In some cases, I would rather have a 3-hour movie where everything makes sense than have a 2-hour movie where I feel there was 45 minutes cut out of this edit that I think were important, and I would rather be a 3-hour experience. Now, if you want to debate whether or not he needed to write a 3-hour script, that's fine. Or if movies need to be 3 hours long, that's fine. But at least it was 3 hours, and I understood. I feel like so much with these big Hollywood blockbusters recently, like Rise of Skywalker is a perfect example of this. That was a 2 hour and 15-minute movie. but I felt like it needed 45 more minutes to explain some of the stuff that was going on. And I would have rather have had a 3-hour cut, even if it was a long Star Wars movie, than feel like something was missing from the movie. Also, the Avatar, all that stuff that you felt was too long, that action sequence was awesome. And I felt like it was him taking what he learned in Terminator, Terminator 2, The Abyss, Titanic, and going, now I'm going to revisit some of these motifs with 2022 technology and what I've learned as a director. And I loved it. I mean, I don't necessarily want to sit down and watch it again in a movie theater because of the time, but I thought moment to moment, beat to beat, it was a pretty great movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I would say this. I think if you cut 45 minutes out of The Batman, you could have made a film that made a lot more sense. It felt like you either needed to add 45 or cut 45. And for God's sakes, let's make a nice, awesome, fun 90-minute Batman film with a kick-ass car, and he just beats up some guys, and we all go home happy. The Avatar film, I disagree with your last point. The last 45 minutes were not the exceptional action sequences. It was all the, let's get back on the boat and save the kids and mom, and they're off the boat, they're on the boat, they're off the boat, now they're back on the boat. It was all unnecessary, dragged out, and kind of boring, whereas you're right, everything that led up to it was fantastic, and then we just got sort of dragged down by this denouement that was too long and this weird extra piece of action at the end of the film that didn't make sense because all the warriors from the water people...
Well, spoiler alert, everybody who hasn't seen Avatar Way of Water.
All the warriors from the water people disappeared, not sure where they went off to, and then suddenly he can't hold his breath for as long as he used to be able to hold his breath. I couldn't make any sense of it.
Oh, man. Well, we fundamentally disagree about that one, but that's fine.
Do you remember this story? So one story, Michael, Chris story that hopefully Michael remembers.
Here we go.
Do you remember when you and I were having some dumb argument? I think it was like, I can't remember. It might have been.
I do remember this story.
Who's more famous, Kim Kardashian or William S. Burroughs? And I think some Australian woman came up to us and like interrupted us and said, this is the dumbest argument I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, but I was right. Kim Kardashian was more famous. And I'm right about Avatar too. But the thing that I think with Batman is the problem with that movie, and we'll move on, is that was clearly a studio that was trying to set up multiple narratives that were going to spin off into multiple HBO Max spin-offs. Colin Farrell's Penguin show. Commissioner Gordon was going to have his own HBO Max Gotham Police Department show. You could feel them wedging in all of these extra storylines that were going to go spin off into, like, I felt like The Batman was created to exist as a Batman universe hub in the HBO Max app. And that kind of stuff drives me crazy. I'd rather have a 65-year-old director trying to make some big, weird, mythological movie that's maybe 45 minutes too long, but makes sense, and it's all part of his weird vision. That I'm on board for more than something like The Batman, which just feels like a little bit cynically put together.
No, I agree with that, but I'd still want them both to be better.
Fair enough.
Rick, have you seen the Avatar movie?
No. Any other questions for me about that?
Will you be seeing the Avatar movie?
No.
Is the same reason you refuse to see the Avatar movie the reason you refuse to watch the Dahmer series?
No. Different reasons. I left the James Cameron boat with Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, I thankfully got off the raft then.
I mean, he's only made 2 movies since then.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's not that hard to resist, I suppose.
And spoiler alert, Kate Winslet is back with
back.
Cameron in the water. And she swore that she would never get in the water with him again.
That's my story. Rose Rewound and myself went to the theater to see Titanic after it had come out. Empty theater.
There's someone named Rose in Titanic.
That's true. But we sat down.
Are you talking about Titanic?
There were 2...
Are you talking about Titanic?
Yeah.
I have an anecdote about when I saw Titanic.
No, we're not talking about Titanic.
With Michael and Chris. I sat between them, and at the very end, I looked to the left and I looked to the right, and both were sobbing, and I was not.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, Rick's anecdote ends with him laughing at everybody who died off on the ship.
No.
That is what happened.
Sobbing, tears streaming down the face.
Look, if you walked into Oprah's show right now, she'd have your ass thrown straight out.
You walked into Forrest one time?
I didn't do this much.
I thought that was a good anecdote.
What would you like?
Now I don't remember why I came up.
Oh, of course not. So Michael and I cried during Titanic. You and Rose did not.
No, yeah, there were two young women.
And I did not.
Yeah, sitting in front of us. We were talking to them, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we've seen it 10 times, right? This is the time, back in the old days where you had to go to the theater to watch it, right?" They were like, "Oh, it's the most amazing movie in the world," and they were just so excited. And then we sat and we're watching the movie. We got overwhelmed with the giggles as the bodies flew down. The digital animated bodies fell down the ship and were bouncing off of things. We had a laughing fit. And then I think we offended the young women who were the only other people in the theater. So yes, yeah, no, I know that makes me a bad person.
That makes you a sociopath.
A sociopath.
I don't know if you want to say they're bad people. To tie it all together was sort of the point of Dahmer. Is he a sociopath? Is he a bad person?
Really, is that? Yeah. So there's no reason to watch it if that's really what they're working out in that series. Now I feel even better for not watching it.
No, they're not working that out. I think Dahmer. I think that the reason why I liked it was it gave a voice to many of the victims that I didn't know much about. That's tremendously sad, and I think I understand why the victims' families did not want more Dahmer content. I mean, there's a ton out there. In fact, the series was kind of an amalgamation of the 5 or 6 things that I've already seen, brought together in a more well-done fashion. But I think the other argument was, what do you do with a human being who's inherently broken? What do you got up there? What are you showing us?
This was a Wisconsin music festival we played at, and I walked up to the guy selling posters, and I said, "Why is William Shatner on the poster for this Milwaukee Music Festival?" And he said to me, "Rick, that's Jeffrey Dahmer." It's a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer with a bunch of cuts of meat around him, and then all the band names underneath.
It's a really bad drawing of Jeffrey Dahmer, so you were in the right to ask that question.
So I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't watch the Dahmer series,
No,
and I'm
no,
sure Jim would have watched it if I hadn't have said something, right, Jim? You were all for it.
Yeah, I wasn't excited about the prospect of that, I guess. I don't know. I probably would have, though. But
Michael, did you finish it? I know you stopped after the first episode.
I haven't gone back to it. I maybe will, maybe won't. It just super depressed me, and I was like, I don't need to watch this.
Yeah, it's a hard watch. All right, let me get us back on track. Let's talk about the nature of the show here today. So I mentioned that I had one more thing to say about the nature of the special, and so I'll do that now.
Can I ask one quick question? I'm so sorry.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Jim, I believe you mentioned on a recent episode, I think it was you, Jim, might have been Rick, you brought up the Fletch movies. One of you guys did. Was that you, Jim?
maybe it was Rick. We were talking about
Rick?
Michael Ritchie,
right?
Right, Michael Ritchie, because we watched a Michael Ritchie movie.
Yeah.
I was curious if any of you guys watched the new Fletch movie with John Hamm, Confess Fletch.
No.
I want to, but I don't think it's on, I have 3 million streaming services, but it's on the one that I don't have.
It's directed by Greg Mottola, who did Superbad and a bunch of other movies. It's really good. I haven't seen the original Chevy Chase Fletch movie since I was a kid. And so I'd like to go back and watch this. I watched this on the plane. It was along with back-to-back with Emily the Criminal, which you guys mentioned, which was great.
Yeah.
I loved Confess Fletch. It actually reminded me of a Lost, Found, and Rewound movie. It's got a real kind of chill 70s vibe to it, kind of gumshoe, simple movie, well acted, well written, not trying to change the nature of filmmaking in any major way, just trying to make a good, entertaining watch. Chris, I think it comes in at 92 minutes. You would love it.
I love it. Great.
But I guess it's supposed to be more like the books than the Chevy Chase movies were, and it actually made me want to go and read the book series. And I hope they make more. So I recommend you guys check out Confess Fletch. I think all three of you would enjoy it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Did we get to what you watched, Michael? I can't remember. Did you tell us what you
Well,
watched?
we mentioned Avatar and Confess Fletch. It's fine. I have a short, and then we Banshees in Sharon. I'll say real quick: Barbarian, Smile, Bodies, 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 which is a blast. Confess Fletch, Little Women from 2019, which I hadn't seen yet. Watched that on the plane as well, to and from Kansas City. Emily the Criminal, Wakanda Forever, Willow, rewatched Willow to start watching the Disney Plus series, which I haven't done yet. Glass Onion, which was also a blast. Triangle of Sadness, which I highly recommend. It's one of the best movies I've seen this year. It's sort of in the White Lotus vein. It's sort of hospitality, black comedy, satire. It's got the upstairs, downstairs kind of stuff. The rich ruling class, the people who work for them. It's a little bit longer. It comes in at 2 hours and 27 minutes, but it has one of the greatest sequences I've seen on film in a long time. Highly recommend that. And then the last movie before Banshees of Inisherin that I watched, my girlfriend and I watched Don't Worry, Darling, with Florence Pugh and Chris's favorite rock star.
Harry Styles.
Yeah, Harry Styles. It's not good, but it's really bad. She's terrific. He's great in it. I would say watch it if you want to be a Florence Pugh or Harry Styles completist. Otherwise, it's a new version of movie tropes that we've seen many times before and doesn't do a good job of reinventing them for the current moment. That being said, if Olivia Wilde would like to cast me in her next movie, I'd be happy to be a part of it.
Whoa. Watch what you're doing
Yeah,
there.
all this stuff I'm in danger of saying. I mean, there were good things about it, but I just think if you want to watch a good movie by Olivia Wilde, watch Booksmart. Booksmart is much
It's a
better.
great movie. Fantastic.
And if you want to watch a terrific movie with Florence Pugh in it, watch Fighting with My Family, if you guys haven't seen that either. A movie based on a real story about a family who the two teenage kids, Florence Pugh plays one of them, want to become WWE wrestlers. It's produced by WWE. I think it's actually produced by Dwayne Johnson. It's got Nick Frost in it, and the woman who played Cersei, again blanking on names from Game of Thrones, are the parents. And it is just a delightful, funny family film. It's one of those that I was like, I don't know if I really want to watch this. And I was just, it's a British movie. I was just like, caught
see
up
that.
in it.
I saw at least
Yeah.
part of that movie. Where did I see that?
You think of the Black Widow movie, Rick, with Florence Pugh, and they
Which
all
I
fight
haven't
together.
seen.
They're like fighting.
No. The wrestling or the pro wrestling movie. I remember. Yeah, I think I watched all of it. Where
was great.
the daughter, the sister, over eclipses
Yes.
the brother, right? Yeah. I did see that. Wow, I totally forgot about that movie, and I didn't even realize it was Florence Pugh. It's from a while ago, right?
Yeah,
From a
it's
few
kind of,
years
it's
ago.
2014, I think.
Ah,
It was one of the
okay.
movies that put her on the map. She did it before Midsummer. Those are my recent watches.
All right, let's get back on track. Thank you for your recommendations, Michael.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
I wanted to start our main segment of the show with an old segment titled "I Apologize," because and I'll be the one doing the apologizing here. So this is my last scripted moment in the show. You'll all be glad to know. So Michael, Rick, Jim, and especially Ari Aster, I apologize for insisting we do this episode. After a careful rewatch of both films, Exorcist III and Hereditary, I could not find much other than some subjectively visceral moments that were similar to these two films. Rick in particular, I'm sorry I made you watch two genre films. I know you find such behavior abhorrent and barely tolerable. Ari, I'm sorry I had such a pretentious and condescending view of your initial feature film. Upon further review, I find it to be an absolute masterpiece with insanely great performances by your entire cast, not just Toni Collette, albeit her performance was off the charts great. My initial criticism of this film was deeply rooted in my own stupidity, ignorance, and reluctance to revisit my own issues with familial and filial dysfunction. I am sincerely sorry for how I originally felt and spoke about Hereditary. On the other hand, I've always loved Exorcist III and hold to this day that it is a kick-ass fucking film.
My mind is blown. Apology accepted by all parties. Also, I cannot wait for 3 years from now when you write the same letter to James Cameron about Avatar: Way of Water.
Well, I'm not writing that about Midsommar, although I guess after I watch the director's cut of Midsommar, I'm going to have to write the same
Let me know.
apology.
I think it will actually. It's one of the rare director's cuts, unlike the Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone, that actually might change your opinion about the movie.
So look, I will apologize to Ari Aster about Midsommar once I watch the extended director's cut, which fixes all the flow issues. I will also apologize to James Cameron when he cuts 45 minutes out of his last film. All right, Hereditary. How did you all feel about it? Rick, I'd be interested in... Actually, let's start with Jim. We've been talking a lot. Jim, how did you feel about Hereditary?
At first, I was like slightly dreading it. You know, it's kind of the same with Midsommar. You know, I was like, oh, I don't know. But once I got into it, I think, I would like it, which I did. It took a while to get going, but it's the same as Midsommar. It's like kind of a bit of, what am I trying to say?
Rosemary's Baby.
It's a bit like being not abused, but it's slightly. Am I really going to go through this? How bad is this going to get? And
yeah.
Which isn't fair because it's heavy drama, and intense, and that's the part that was great. Like all the supernatural stuff I kind of enjoy, but I enjoy it when it's more tongue-in-cheek, kind of like Exorcist III, and it's obviously much more of a humorous movie. But so I was worried this would be too serious, and it is obviously very serious, but there's not really any humor at all, I don't think. So I was like wondering, just the supernatural stuff gets. I don't buy into it at all, really. So it's fun. I view it more like in fun movies. And then this is like taking itself too seriously. And it's like all the ritual stuff. And it's like, it wasn't too bad. But by the end, it got a little silly. But it was great, though. I'm glad I watched it. It's the same, same as Midsommar. I'm glad I finally saw it. On my own, I probably wouldn't watch either of these, or Midsommar, I probably would have come around to it at some point, but it's just like reading about it. I'm like, oh, do I really want to watch this? But it's great that you guys make me watch this stuff. So I didn't feel too badly abused by it, but it was like, it's just kind of like, oh, is this worth going through,
Yeah, it's about trusting the director, right?
Yeah.
Do you trust the director? Are they doing this because it propels the story, the ideas and concepts, or are they just
not like an exploitation movie or something? Just it definitely delivered. Like you said, the performances and the acting, her whole performance was the key thing. It's amazing. Well, like I kind of feel sorry. Well, Gabriel Byrne is like I was wondering like if he was just going to go off, by the end of it, like he doesn't, he just peters, he just dies, and I just expected him to explode or something, just him to be more of a part of it. So
he did.
It's just this quiet kind of feel, and then he breaks down, has that breakdown, and finally kind of is completely losing it. But that was great too, how understated he was, or it's like I could relate to that character being like that, like me. I could relate to this quiet guy, or like my dad, it's like he's like our father or something, is like this mild-mannered guy, like if you're involved in this insane situation.
I love that he is trying for the whole movie as the therapist and the husband, father, to be the voice of reason and keep everybody grounded during everything that's going on. And there's just like really quiet moment rewatching it that really struck me, where he's moved down to the couch because he's starting to quietly suspect that Toni Collette, Anne, is losing her mind. And he goes and sleep on the couch, and he sits up, and he's got medication there. We don't know what it is. It might be a sleeping pill. It might be something, it might be antidepressant or anti-anxiety. And there's just that moment where he sits and he plops one pill in his mouth, and then he looks at the bottle and he plops another pill in there. And I was like, that's kind of all you need to know about his character in this moment, is he is just struggling to remain under control no matter what. Like, he's either got to really sleep through the night so he has enough energy for tomorrow, or he needs double dose of his medication to not fucking lose it.
Your review is amazing, Jim, because it kind of brought to light why I think I had such a, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I had a bit of a turnaround on this film the second viewing. I was not as worried about what the director was going to do to me because I knew what he was going to do. And I think part of what Ari Aster is really good at is amplifying your anxiety about what could potentially happen. By beheading the young, mentally challenged girl in the film, at that point you're like, well, he could do anything now. That's what really put me in a really bad place the first time I watched it. Is like, I don't think I trust what this guy is doing. I don't think this is very well thought through. Plus, all that stuff was true about all the family anxiety and filial relationship stuff really put me in a bad place first time I watched the movie. But this time, I knew what was going to happen, and I sort of said, well, what if I just saw this as a horror movie like Exorcist III? This is just a horror movie. It's about someone being possessed. I know that now because I've seen it once. And it was a far better film when I took it less seriously. That's what made it actually kind of fun to watch, even though there's some really dark and depressing moments. And I think the one thing I never noticed was how good Gabriel Byrne was in the film, because Toni Collette is really kind of stealing the show. But I was like, wait, every actor in this film is phenomenal. Even the little girl, like every human being in this film is acting their asses off, is being directed incredibly well. Just as meticulously as the set is designed and all the art direction is and how beautiful. Rick, you had mentioned styling your house after it. I don't know if you read, but that is a set that was built so that they could pull the walls apart and take it apart and push the cameras in so that it would be like a miniature. So they actually built, instead of using a real house, he wanted to be able to manipulate the rooms and just like you would pull the front off of a miniature house and kind of look in. He wanted to be able to do that with the cameras, and he actually kind of does that in that initial shot when he comes into the boy's bedroom. Yeah. And it really looks like a fake dollhouse, except there's a real boy laying in there. And I'm not sure if that was actually a shot or if they did a mat with a dollhouse and then just had the boy laying in bed. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, I think Jim put it more eloquently, is now that I didn't have to take the film seriously because I knew it was just a horror film, I found it a lot more fun, other than some of the very serious, intense moments of gore.
In my post-film discussion I had with Graham Rewound, my son, I felt it was an elevated horror film. Like, we were talking about Rosemary's Baby, which he hasn't seen, and I basically said over and over again, I can't really talk about this movie without talking about Rosemary's Baby, and thinking about the way Rosemary's Baby went beyond typical horror or B-movie films and sort of jumped a level. And I felt that was the same thing with this film. I feel like it was operating on a higher level than just a basic horror film.
Kansas City. Food-wise, a city famous for its barbecue. But that's about to change. My name is W. Dave Keith, host of the podcast Taco the Town, and I believe that Kansas City is one of the most underrated, underappreciated, up-and-coming taco towns in the USA. On Taco the Town, we will shine a light on all the amazing tacos Kansas City has to offer. Kansas City is a great taco town filled with a variety of untapped taco stylings and flavors, and on the Taco the Town podcast, we won't stop until we've tasted every taco in the town. No taco table will go unturned. Each episode, we review a new taco joint with a special guest. We share taco memories, discuss taco topics, and put tacos to the test. We check the latest stories in taco news, and no taco is off the table on Taco the Town. If you love tacos, like I do, you're gonna love Taco the Town. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Play. That's Taco the Town.
I'm trying to understand why all the women have to lose their heads. Was there some reason for that I missed?
I can jump in if
yes,
you want
please.
me to answer this question. So the beheading is part of the ritual to possess Payman. Ari Aster in an interview was asked about it, and he was like, I took a liberty with that. That's not part of any real occult ritual that I researched. I have my reason for it, That's one of the things that he leaves up to the audience to piece together for themselves. He said that he wanted to make a movie where the audience was not omniscient to what was happening. He wanted to put them in, and this is what I really like about this movie, and it's kind of like very similar to Rosemary's Baby. Initially, I would have compared this movie more to Rosemary's Baby than I would something like Exorcist III. But he wanted to put the audience in the place of the characters who are the victims of this generations-long ritual taking place. And so that when they're surprised that something is happening, the audience is surprised too. If the characters don't have all the information, the audience doesn't have the information either. And he said, but at the same time, there are places where he felt he had to put in a little bit of explanation and exposition so we could at least keep this thing on rails. And at the same time, he wanted the movie to feel that the movie knew that something evil was going on, and this was not going to end well for anybody. He set a tone that the movie, with the music and the way it was cut and edited, that the movie is almost a sad, sinister, I'm paraphrasing him, but almost a sad, almost evil narrator that knows, which helps the unease of the audience being like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but I'm also being told by this third voice that something really bad is going to happen. And that's what I really responded to watching it, is so many horror movies are put together in a way where, for example, Exorcist III, it's almost all exposition, right? It's almost like, well, this happened because of this, and this is like, this Gemini killer is back, I think, and now we need to go back, dip back into parts 1 and 2. And that, to be fair, I think that happens when you have a third movie that's based on a book, a third book in a series. That's a movie that is trying to tie things together with what's come before, whereas this is a standalone thing. But I loved that experience of going, I feel like I'm one of the victims here. And that's that feeling. I think we're all feeling that anxiety and dread that we got. We're like, I don't know if I trust this guy, this filmmaker, to take care of us in the movie. And I like that for some reason. You know, at times when Tarantino is his best, and I may have said this on the Midsommar episode, when Tarantino's his best, I feel the same way with Tarantino, where I'm like, something's going to go off. It's build, build, build. I know this is probably going to explode in some way, and I don't trust him to take care of me in the situation. I don't know if there's a specific answer to the beheading, but I think it's all part of this lineage that all the women in the family had to be beheaded, as I would say, as an offer to Payman. Charlie, though, was always Payman. There's no Charlie. There was no personality that was Charlie. Charlie was always Payman from the moment she was born. But she was weird because it's Payman in a female body instead of a male body. And the whole point was Grandma missed Peter when he was born because Toni Collette kept her away. She had been trying to do it to Toni Collette's brother, and he said, she keeps trying to replace me with people, and so he killed himself. And then when Charlie was born, again, a male name named after Toni Collette's character's father. So they're already trying to make Charlie a boy. That's one of the first lines that Charlie said, Grandma wanted me to be a boy. There was no Charlie. It was just Payman in the body of an infant girl. And then, because they call Peter Charlie at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
When he wakes back up, they're like, it's okay, Charlie, you're Payman, you know? But I think I don't know. I think the decapitation is just part of the sacrifice, one of the sacrifices in this long, long ritual.
Well, do you remember the mom's note to her that she reads early on in the film? She says that our sacrifices or our losses or something like that
will far outweigh the riches we will receive.
I thought she was referring to something that happened in the past that Toni Collette was in on, and obviously Toni Collette knew something was afoot, but maybe it was the fact that they had to behead themselves.
I think that's literally what it is. It was like, you'll understand once this whole ritual's over with that this was all good intentions. And there's such great moments watching a second time where if the family would have just stopped and taken a moment to look at the clues, they might have figured out earlier on that something was going on, but because it's a dysfunctional family drama, nobody wants to look at it. No one wants to look at the problem. She didn't open the book where that note was. She was too angry at her mom, so she opened the book then. Charlie may have never been beheaded. If they had ever stopped to go, wait a minute, what are these weird words that are being scratched into our walls? They might have said, hey, I think someone is breaking into the house and moving things around and writing shit on the walls. If she had looked at what Charlie was looking at in the opening, towards the opening sequence, when there was one of the cult members doing a fire ritual down the hill, she may have seen what Charlie was seeing and gone, wait a minute, why are they burning something behind the house? I like that too, that there's this idea of if these characters had just stopped and faced their problems, they might have figured out that they were all under attack.
Totally agree. Rick, did you enjoy the film? I kind of picked up the vibe that you're like, well, feels like a retelling of Rosemary's Baby, which, my criticism of this film initially was it had borrowed too much from Exorcist III.
That I don't see. Yeah, I don't see the Exorcist III connection except for the woman on the ceiling. And the
beheadings.
There's beheading. Yeah.
And the sociopathic behavior.
And the guy who's possessed also gets his nose broken and has a bandage over his nose after George C. Scott punches him.
Yeah. So there are a lot of references. Yeah.
The eyes, I noticed that too. The killer in Exorcist III, they're like ingots. He calls them ingots, are driven into the victim's eyes.
Oh, that's right.
There's the picture of Peter, the kid.
Yeah.
His eyes are poked out in the photograph.
But a lot of this stuff, too, they're tropes because they're tropes. Like levitation and being able to crawl up walls, that's something that goes back to the Salem witch trials. That I saw Goody so-and-so floating in the woods. This idea of when you're possessed by a demonic force, you gain the power of flight. That's something that existed before The Exorcist. That's just demonology stuff.
Well, yes, but I like to ask Ari Aster if he'd seen Exorcist III, because
I'm sure he has.
Particularly with her crawling on the wall, and then there was also the scene where she comes out of the shadows with her arms outstretched like this, and I don't even remember one of the creepiest scenes in Exorcist III is the nurse is out doing her rounds. She kind of opens this door, and I think the camera's even just a still shot of a hallway.
Which is a very Ari Aster thing, which is a long, wide shot where the camera is still and you're watching a horrific thing play out in a long shot. Totally.
Right. Yeah, and in Exorcist III, the guy comes like with the scissors, I think, to behead the female nurse. And she does the same thing. She comes from a corner shadow, arms outstretched in almost the same musical sting happens at that time.
Yeah.
So
he mentioned horror as a genre that he grew up with. I think he cites in interviews, especially Don't Look Now and Rosemary's Baby, as two influences. I haven't seen yet him mention Exorcist III, but I'm sure it's there. I mean, I looked on Reddit, and there's a lot of other people who have been making these comparisons between the two movies. And I think it's just because he's a guy who, like us, grew up with these films. And his approach was he wanted to make a dysfunctional family drama because I guess there's stuff in his family. He said he's very close with his mom and dad and his brother, and he has a very good relationship with everybody, but he refuses to get into detail, I'm sure out of respect, but someone in his family or multiple people in his family, it seems, have dealt with some really hard stuff. I'm going to assume and speculate it's mental illness stuff. He knew as a filmmaker, he was like, the problem is if you're trying to make a movie and you want to make a dysfunctional family drama, you might get funding for it. It might find an audience, but it's probably going to be an alienating experience because most audiences aren't going to necessarily sign up for that. But if you package it in a horror movie, you can make a lot of the same points that you would in a movie like Ordinary People is another movie that he points to. And audiences might get that same stuff, but fed to them through the lens of horror. And so you end up with this cool mashup of Ordinary People and Rosemary's Baby. That's the kind of thing that I love, where it doesn't, I think your initial reaction to it, Chris, was that it was an Exorcist III ripoff. Makes me think, well, there are ripoffs and then there's taking stuff that's worked before, remixing it to create something maybe new or to add to that conversation. And I always felt that's what he was doing in this movie, that these things were homages to the genre and, again, are part of demonology stuff and part of poltergeist and haunting stuff, so you're going to get those. There are only so many tropes in those sort of genres,
I didn't think it was a ripoff. I just thought it was a bad movie that then was borrowing tropes from other good films to try and make itself an effective horror film, which I changed my opinion on. I think that it was a great horror film using the language of horror films throughout the years to tell a horror story. And I do think, yes, he's wrapping in the elements of family dysfunction. I would say like sort of a typical Protestant, nobody talks about the problems, but the problems are clearly there kind of approach to the film. And like you say, Michael, that handicaps the whole family because they're so quiet about everything, or Gabriel Byrne is sort of seething through this thing, trying to stomach it out to the detriment of the situation because by the time they do figure it out, it's too late. Or maybe
no one's comparing notes until Toni Collette seems absolutely out of her mind.
Well, and they all die as soon as they figure something out. Like that's the moment they're all dead. The film Relic, that's the one that I think is just clearly a metaphor for Alzheimer's. Remember? And that's where I was like, oh, this isn't a horror film. This is a metaphor. Whereas I think that Hereditary is a horror film. It's not a metaphor. And
I think they're both. I mean, I think horror is often a metaphor. I kind of figured that out watching movies with you, Chris, early in our adulthood. Dawn of the Dead being the clearest example of the original of, this is a commentary on mass consumerism. This is what we all become, if we all become mass consumers, we're just zombies. Or Body Snatchers being, a commentary and a metaphor for, the fear of communism, of being taken over by a foreign thought structure.
Like Night of the Living Dead and Get Out, is that what it was called? Both have sort of the same message to them as well. They're a metaphor for the way people are treated in society. And actually, one of the reasons we probably don't have time to get into it, but I really liked Nope. I heard a lot of bad reviews of Nope. I don't know if you guys have seen Nope. I loved it. I thought it was really well done. Rick, your Nope review?
I thought it was okay. It was a good mashup of Close Encounters and Jaws.
Yeah. Jaws with a UFO.
The college dorm discussion about Hereditary after the film that I had last night, it's all, to me, it was a metaphor for intergenerational trauma. And also, when she says, I understand now it's my fault, when Toni Collette says that, where it's that idea of, it's exploring that idea of how long do you blame your parents for all the messed up stuff that's happening to you and that you impart on your children, right? And then at some point, there has to be a line where it's like, I can't use my parents as an excuse for traumatizing my children. Where we got at the end in the discussion is that at the end, intergenerational trauma isn't even that. It's all about a culture or a society, right? That trauma, it's not that your grandparents were terrible people and that's why it's that the society or the culture, the rituals are what caused that trauma.
And that it's a sickness that's passed down and shapeshifts. Because that moment that you talk about, Rick, is one of the best moments of the movie, I think. And it's also one that I had, when I talked about this movie with friends, they'd be like, okay, but what are the rules? How come when she tries to burn it, she catches on fire, but then when she burns it again, he catches on fire? So in the supernatural world, putting on my other podcast hat here, there's a thing called the cosmic trickster. And the cosmic trickster is the outside force, in this case would be the demon, Payman, or the ritual that's happening, where as soon as someone goes, I figured out how this works, cosmic trickster will say, I don't play by those fucking rules. So the moment she goes, I know what it is, it's me, and the only way to stop it is if I do this, because I've seen evidence of it before, she tries the experiment again, and the cosmic trickster goes, fuck you, I'm going to burn your husband instead. You have no control over this thing that is shape-shifting all around you and does not play by the rules that you think you're learning as you go along.
I think I remember something either in text about Payman or someone talking about Payman that he can't be trusted. Or there's some. I didn't question that. I bought it. What happened there? The switch.
Well, I had that question and I wanted to know why. I'd be upset if it's just that it's the trickster playing a trick. I want to know why once she takes the blame that the fire transfers to her husband.
I think that the fire ritual that we see out in that Charlie sees taking place down the hill is some sort of fire curse, binding them, making sure some sort of protective spell for the cult and for Payman. But I think there's probably an ability for Payman to move around, or another demon, perhaps it's the fire aspect, to defend itself in different ways. As long as it's bound to one of the family members, I think it's fine. But I do think it is a manipulation of the demon saying, as soon as you think you've got me figured out, you don't know anything because I'm the one calling the shots here. You're not. And I think that that's what it was doing in that moment.
Yeah, that reminded me of all the Sinister and all those other movies that you and I have watched, Michael, where it's the demon can't be trusted, that they always have the upper hand. By the way, on the point of systemic or societal trauma, I've recently watched the Casey Anthony documentary on Netflix. And I know I mentioned before the Lorena Bobbitt documentary that I watched, I think, a couple of years ago. I highly recommend watching those two documentaries. They do the same thing in the Casey Anthony thing. The first episode of the documentary presents the case to you as the media presented to us then, and you are clearly do not trust these women and know that they were clearly in the wrong in everything they've done. And then when you get to the end of the series, it is so obvious that they had done nothing wrong and were actually victims themselves. And that's what led to these events. And in some cases, things they didn't do or whatever. Anyway, I would suggest, I just want to make a quick suggestion, to watch those two documentaries, because I think they say a lot about how willing we were to let the media and society in general just pile on to these people who were either who were both victims and very innocent in their particular situations.
And women.
And women, yeah. And just how, Michael was saying those things about how it's not just generational trauma, it's a part of our society. That two incredible examples of how these people were personally abused by individuals and then they were systemically abused by society.
And actually, one of the Central Park Five are going to be visiting campus here next week, and they're showing the documentary about the Central Park Five, too. Yeah, that whole thing. Not just being women, but also being African-American, right? It was just like, these narratives just fly, and no one questions.
Let's start making the transition into Exorcist III. I think we talked about the things that were the similar between the two films. The reason why I keep needling Rick about Dahmer is I saw in Dahmer that Dahmer would watch Exorcist III almost on a daily basis and watched it with some of his victims. That's actually in the first. You probably saw that in the first episode.
Yeah, which is wild because the Gemini killer is based on the Zodiac killer. So clearly he was... I mean, I don't know, I'm speculating, but, like relating to the Zodiac through the Gemini killer in Exorcist III.
Yeah, just sort of a bizarre detail, and also another head scratcher around the whole Dahmer story, because I think it's very hard to kind of pigeonhole I don't think he was as clear-cut of a sociopath or a serial killer as these movies villains are, or even some of the other serial killers in time, Bundy or Gacy or any of them.
Chris, what you're saying is Jeffrey Dahmer, like you always say, is he was misunderstood, like you often say about the serial killers that you watch movies and documentaries about.
I absolutely think serial killers are misunderstood. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that they're good people. I just want to be real clear about that. Exorcist III. Sorry, I took us on too far of a tangent.
Well, but also, when I was up, I'm not sure if anyone mentioned it, the Zodiac killer mentioned The Exorcist in his letters to the newspapers in San Francisco. Wow. And said it was like a comedy, the funniest satire he'd seen in a long time. So there is a direct link between Zodiac to, I would say, Dahmer through the entire Exorcist franchise. Because some people think that William Peter, Blatty, that he put the Gemini killer in Exorcist III as sort of a callback to the Zodiac's infatuation with the first movie.
Ah, interesting. Since you had to walk away, Michael, because of dog barking, I did want to get a note from the previous film before we get completely into Exorcist III. Did you notice that during the intense family arguments, I think around the glass moving, where they're all sort of doing the Ouija thing with the glass, the dog is constantly barking in the background? So with the second act of the film, the dog is always barking in the background. And I thought it was my dogs until I like paused the film and saw that it was their dog, because it was like so annoying. And I was like, well, that has to be atmospheric in the house here in my own house. And it was actually in the film. And then when he flies out the window at the end and lands in the garden, and in the third act, the dog is not barking, it's dead.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I did catch it barking during the seance part, but I know watching it again this time, I was like, oh, I forgot they had a dog. I feel so sorry for this dog. And this is coming off of the Banshees of Inisherin. I was emotionally prepared for that dog to be dead at the end of this movie. That's all I'll say.
I felt really bad. So when the dog shows up in the doorway, like towards the end of the movie, I was
the door slams on him and he yelps.
Yeah. I was like, they have a dog?
Yeah, same with me. I didn't realize.
Didn't even know they had a dog.
He's in the very first shot when he comes into the bedroom with the kid. The dog comes in with the father.
And then when they come home from Grandma's funeral, he greets them and they pet him. And I was just like, fuck, poor. Like, that's the other thing is like all these pets that have to deal with this intergenerational trauma. You know what I mean?
It's one thing for a human. You imagine, a poor little dog trying to understand what's going on.
It's like when you see someone, you're like, that person is clearly an asshole, and they have a pet, and you're like, I feel really bad for that dog. They don't know how much of an asshole their owner is.
Would this whole movie, why didn't they have an EpiPen?
They do. They mention it. They forget it. They mention it. She says at the funeral, she goes, that doesn't have nuts in it, right? Because we didn't bring the EpiPen.
Yeah. It's like, why, your daughter's deathly allergic and they're always constantly leaving the EpiPen. It's like goes to this party without, when they have it in the glove compartment of the car,
We forgot ours all the time. As our child would have died had she had a sandwich that was cut with a knife that had previously cut a cheese sandwich, and we had to take her to the emergency room because we didn't have an EpiPen on us. So it happens. Forgetting the EpiPen happens.
Okay.
Yeah, Rose Rewound absolutely hated Toni Collette's character. It was just like, this is a bad mother. There's nothing about this woman. She's just a bad, selfish, self-centered artist.
That's harsh criticism.
Yeah.
All right, one last segment. We'll call this Innocuous Hot Seat, so you can trust this one. Peter's keyboard. It looks like a full-size 88-key keyboard with a large K and a large T on it. Gentlemen, to the brothers, anybody know what keyboard that was?
Was it something like Kurzweil?
Oh, yeah, Kurzweil makes sense, right? Yeah, that has a K and a T.
I didn't notice. Yeah, I didn't really see a name. I did notice it in a couple shots, but I didn't.
That's almost as extreme as Ferris Bueller having a Emulator 2 sampler in his house, in his bedroom, which at the time was like $50,000 in 1985 dollars. It was a huge amount of money.
You know that Ferris Bueller charmed his way into getting that thing. Money was no obstacle for Ferris Bueller.
Got a demo copy of the Emulator 2.
I like that the two of you could easily solve something that I looked on Reddit for like 20 minutes and no one could answer the question of what keyboard that was. All right, sorry. We'll go back to Exorcist III. Jim, your thoughts on the film?
I made sure to watch this after, or to watch Hereditary first. I've seen Exorcist III probably 20 some years ago. I knew it would be like a lighthearted romp compared to Hereditary, so it would be like a feel good movie to cleanse my palate, after watching Hereditary. So I made sure to watch it after. So, and I was right. I do remember it's such a crazy movie, especially the beginning. All the fun stuff really is to the beginning. Then it gets all typical kind of more horror. The whole beginning is still baffling. They're just having fun, I guess, or it's. Blatty directed this too, right? The writer. So he wasn't really a director, was he? Did he do other movies or
The Ninth Configuration? A large number of people from the Ninth Configuration, right? Ninth Configuration, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Are in this movie too. It's kind of like, okay, guys, I know things didn't work out with this last movie. Let's try it again. See if it works better.
It's a fun movie. It's such a silly. I remember watching this with the band. Rick and I, we were at probably after practice at some point, we watched it. It just was so crazy, like seeing the first opening, Larry King at the restaurant, and then it's C. Everett Koop. Yeah, it was, I don't know if we saw him first, or it was like, or watching it again, it was like they're in the same restaurant. So it's like a double hit. Just all of a sudden, it's like, wait, that's C. Everett Koop. Oh, wait. Oh, and Larry King's obviously has a line, but the C. Everett Koop is just crazy. He's just, I guess, friends. He must have been friends with him, or just pals, and all the carp stuff. And what is all that?
Carp stuff is the best.
It's my favorite. Yeah,
it's hilarious.
Scene in
Yeah,
the
George C. Scott. Obviously he must have been just. I wonder if some of that was improvised, like the whole him talking to the guy from St. Elsewhere when they're kind of having a regular conversation, and it's just. I wonder how much of that was scripted. Or
I also love that he could go from 0 to screaming at someone for no reason.
Yeah.
Like immediately on a dime. A lot of his character choices were like, I'm just going to scream my last line at this person.
Yeah, one of my notes is just yelling with an exclamation point, because at some point he infects I can't remember the actress's name who plays the nurse, the kind of angry nurse, and then she goes off, and it's like, well, if George C. Scott can do this, I'm going to do it, you know? And it's like, oh, now she's yelling. Everybody's going to be yelling in this movie.
It's also kind of reminding me of, like, have you seen The Ninth Gate?
Polanski? Did Polanski do
Polanski,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's from like 1999. It's
Johnny Depp, isn't
Johnny
it?
Depp, yeah.
Johnny Depp, yeah.
I watched that, and I watched, there was a commentary track too, and he talks about, well, it's definitely totally satirical, just humor, tongue-in-cheek, even more so than Exorcist III, but it's just like making fun of it almost. And he talks in the commentary track, Polanski says, like, it's sort of how he viewed Rosemary's Baby. He didn't really take it seriously, or it sounded like, I don't know if he's saying this after the fact. He always felt like, I could never do this movie unless, if it was serious. Rosemary's Baby, I had to see the humor in it and stuff. I didn't believe all this. And Ninth Gate is way over the top, is like completely silly. But I have a feeling, I don't know if he's just after the fact saying that, but at the time, I think he was kind of surprised at how serious people took it, Rosemary's Baby. But I think he knew it was pretty creepy to people. But
I don't feel like Exorcist III I don't think it's a joke. But I don't know if that stuff is intentional.
It feels like it's very earnestly made to me, and almost like he's earnestly trying to make like a 70. Like going back and watching it, and I was like, man, this is 1990. Like it's filmed like it's a 1970s movie, and I don't know if he's just trying to keep it in tone from the original. But it does. I agree with you, Rick. I feel like this is a very earnest. This feels like an author who got to make the movie of one of his books, and he finally gets all the control, and it's a very earnestly made movie.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I know, like, all the horror stuff, like, is serious. Demon, all that stuff is like, he's definitely taking it seriously. I believe that, yeah. But just the wacky, just the, like, it's the more
carp
in the
bathtub type stuff.
Yeah. There is humor throughout the film. Yes.
Just that stuff, but I definitely agree that he's taking this seriously.
And so that's the other thing, is the idea of control is like he had control for a while, but then he lost control of the film. I mean, they made, so all the stuff with the exorcism and Nicole Williamson was added on later. So the movie companies, first off, it was going to be called Legion. There wasn't going to be any exorcism, even though Father Karras, right? Mm-hmm. That guy wasn't in it. So Brad Dourif did everything. Did all of the scenes with George C. Scott as the Gemini killer. So the stuff with the actor from The Exorcist was added in later. The whole exorcism scene was added in later. They did reshoots to add in that ending. That's why I wanted to see. I don't want to see the director's cut so much that I'm going to buy the DVD of it. Apparently that came out, but there is a version of the film that's shorter that doesn't have any of that extra stuff that was kind of put in.
I wonder who is behind the choice of putting that voice modulation on Brad Dourif, because that was such a crime. He is so good, and he's so good in that performance to put like a demonic voice under, like let him use his real voice. His real voice is great. Watching Brad Dourif in this movie, you're like, this guy should have been the Joker in the 89 Batman. He would have been an amazing Joker. Jack Nicholson, fantastic Joker. But if you wanted like a real Joker that's not a little campy, he would have been amazing. Those scenes with him in the cell are very Joker-esque scenes.
He has like it's like a Shakespeare thing almost, the monologue he does is like 15 minutes long that towards the end, he just goes on, and that was pretty amazing.
I watched a Brad Dourif film last night that would be a good argument for him to be the Joker. This film was shot 2 years earlier, 1988, called Child's Play.
Yep.
And Dourif, both in human and in doll form, and as I think you all know, I fucking hate dolls, so it was a torturous experience for me to watch this film, because dolls are evil, and we should not trust them, nor should we make movies about them. But I watched it for this podcast, and he was great in that. He was really that was a really fun and good movie. And it's interesting because Dourif says in his diatribe, he says something about Little Jack Horner, and then he says Child's Play, Lieutenant. I didn't know if that was a reference, because this Exorcist III was 1990 and Child's Play was 88, so didn't know if that was a reference. The other thing that you're pointing out, there was a real playfulness to the film. George C. Scott brings the priest a stuffed penguin to the hospital, which is funny because, nuns are called penguins.
Right.
So I thought it was funny that he brought him. So there was playfulness in it, the carp story. You guys talk about the earnestness of this film, and what was this film? Michael, you said 70s film. I think it might actually go back further. They talk about The Fly versus It's a Wonderful Life, and how he favors The Fly. He thought that It's a Wonderful Life was sort of, this sappy film, and he thought The Fly was one that was, he talks, I think, about the earnestness of the film, and I think in the end of The Fly, I forget who has to do it, but one main character has to smash the other main character with a rock. I don't know if you all seen the original Fly.
Yeah, in the remake, it's Gina Davis has to shoot him in the head with a shotgun.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the original Fly, which is referenced in this movie. We're not referencing the Cronenberg.
No, I know.
Well, no, actually, so what I read is that the actor who plays the priest that says his favorite movie is The Fly was actually in the Cronenberg Fly.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so when was the Cronenberg Fly?
87, 86?
Something like that, yeah.
88,
Was it really?
maybe?
I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah.
Well, I thought they were referring to, there's some point in The Fly, the original Fly, where one man comes across his friend's head on the body of a tiny fly in the rose garden.
86.
And I think the fly saying, like, save me or something, and he has to crush and kill the fly, similar to the way that George C. Scott had to shoot his friend, right? He kills the Brad Dourif character in the jail cell, knowing that I think he's sacrificing an innocent man.
Yeah.
Right.
To oust the demon.
Another great Brad Dourif role that I feel like has a connection to all the other roles we mentioned in this episode is his role of Luther Lee Boggs on the episode of The X-Files called Beyond the Sea. He plays a death row inmate who claims to have psychic powers and can help. He's like a Hannibal Lecter kind of guy who can help Mulder track down a serial killer, but then also claims to be able to channel Scully's recent father who recently died. And he's great in that. I think that was one of the first things I ever saw him in when I was growing up. He's really good in that. And it echoes of Exorcist III.
Not connected to Exorcist III at all, but I just watched a while ago. It's a John Huston film that he did with Brad Dourif it's called Wise Blood. He's like a preacher.
Cool.
A street preacher in the 1920s, I think. It's a weird film. Definitely seems partially improvised, and then basically almost all him. He's the whole film, so it's pretty amazing.
Unsung hero of acting, Brad Dourif.
I always wondered about him, and then also Bud Cort, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of lump them together, where it's just like they're just too weird to be able to sustain a full career, because the 70s was kind of like the character actor decade.
Dourif has played Chucky in everything. So, I mean,
right,
he's made
he's
a
in
career
Deadwood as well. He was great in Deadwood. He's had a career, but he's not been, I don't think he's gotten the accolades and the recognition that his talent deserves. I think he is brilliant.
he's in Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like,
Right.
why is he in Blue Velvet? Like he plays
Just
like
a
a minor
bit
character.
part,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, he's great. But it's like, why is he not a bigger star in more, or bigger element in more films? It was always like he'd pop up, but it was like, why don't I see more of him?
So Gala Avery, producer of the Video Archives podcast, loves Brad Dourif and has continually sang his praises, loves his films. Have you heard about this Video Archives podcast?
No.
It's two screenwriters, old-time screenwriters, have been screenwriters in Hollywood for decades now, bought the video store. One of them bought the video store that they worked in together and set it up in his basement. And they go down in his basement and they watch 3 films from VHS films or whatever they are from the video archives and then review the films. And I was like, this podcast sounds really similar to Lost and Found and Rewound. So we're going to have to talk to Roger Avery and Quentin Tarantino about this podcast that they've started.
I'm just interested in the fact that both of them, they're on speaking terms and that's interesting.
They seem to be great friends.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, longtime great friends.
Oh, the other great performance in Exorcist 3 is, what's his name? Scott Wilson.
Yeah, another actor
He's-
who should have been more.
He's like,
More
in like
popular.
the right stuff. I looked him, I was like, oh, who's that? I know that guy. I remember, he's in he was in Cold Blood. That's his big movie in 1950s. Yeah.
Showed up in The Walking Dead when
Yep.
I used to watch it. Yeah. He's in the 9th configuration too. Yeah.
Passed away a few years ago.
I wonder if it started in real life. Like he has the script before George C. Scott comes in to see him. He's practicing his speech basically to George C. Scott.
That was wild. That's a wild moment. You're like, what is
wonder, was he doing that on set? Like he hadn't learned his lines and he had a little cheat sheet and then it's like, let's keep that in.
I think it's a red herring because I think it wants you to think that maybe he's the one doing
Right.
all the possession or rituals because his office is also like, what doctor is allowed to have all that weird stuff in his office?
Yeah.
The pentagram of the Playboy centerfold with like weird heads on all of her appendages.
Yeah.
This should be brought to HR is all I'm
It's
saying.
a different time. It's a different
Yeah.
time.
Different time.
1990.
He's
You could smoke.
Yeah,
in your
He's a
office.
psychiatrist.
32 years ago.
It's not a normal doctor. It's a psychiatrist. So
Very
it's
strange.
totally
That's right.
normal.
Like Gabriel Byrne.
Right. Exactly. Hey.
So let's do a quick round of how much older, how much younger.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I hate this. I do not like this one.
So using me as a baseline at 52 years old, I'll put to the three of you. I have here Ed Flanders.
That's the one I looked up.
Okay, so you're not in contention for this. Michael and Rick, how much older is Ed Flanders than I am at age 52 years old?
I have to remind me who Ed Flanders played. Was he
The priest.
the priest?
His
Who's
buddy.
addicted to lemon drops because he spent years listening to kids give confessions. Apparently, at some point, children ate lemon drops, which I find hard to believe.
And he was insane elsewhere.
The very seasoned, old-looking priest.
I'm gonna say he's 1 year older than you.
Okay, Rick?
I'm going to say, let me think about it.
Yeah, I'm putting him at a solid 53.
I'm going to say 50.
He was how much older? I'm 52. I appreciate you thinking that I'm younger than 50, but 56
Wow,
is what Ed Flanders in the
Wow.
film. 4 years.
that guy looks 73 at least.
Yeah.
I was going to say my age as a guess. I should have said that.
All right, next is how much older is George C. Scott at the time of the film than I am today? I'm 52 years old.
He looks old. Like he looks like he's gonna die any second. Like he's gonna walk off set and have a heart attack.
So here's a spoiler, is he was most likely drunk during most of the filming. So there's also the aging of, severe alcoholism.
I just spent the last 2 weeks drunk, so I think we even up there.
I'll say he's 58. I don't think he's 60 yet, but he's getting close.
Okay, Rick, your guess?
I'm going to say 60.
Jim?
Yeah, I think he's older. I'll go 62.
Close, 63. He's
Wow.
11 years older than me
Wow.
at
Okay.
the time of the film.
Okay. All right.
how much younger than me was Brad Dourif at the time the film was made?
Let's see, because he's in Cuckoo's Nest. So he's been around for a while. I'm going to put him at 48, maybe 49. 48.
Rick?
He might be closer to 40, 45 or 46 now that I'm saying it.
I'm going to say he was 22 in Cuckoo's Nest. So and then 15 years later, that would make him 37.
Jim?
I'm going older. I think I'll say 42.
He's 40.
40.
He's 12 years younger than me.
He's 4 years younger than me.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? That just speaks to either how young we think we look or how young we actually look. I'm not sure.
Or the difference between aging in 2022 and aging in 1990.
When somebody tells me I look young, I say it's the fat Irish face.
Yeah,
that's what I say. It's
saying
like,
yep to
there's
myself.
an advantage. Yeah. It's like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, that's the advantage. Is if you're too thin, it starts coming back at you as you get older.
That's why I'm avoiding being thin.
Yeah. That's my excuse.
And you haven't had a drink since you're a teen, so that helps
That
too.
helps. Yeah, probably. Don't smoke. Although I secondhand smoked for a good 10 or 15 years.
I enjoy a good secondhand smoke. If somebody at work will go out smoking, and my wife smokes now, so I'll go out there and just sort of enjoy some of the fumes. That's all the notes I have, gentlemen. We have, I think, a good 2 minutes left on the podcast. How do we wrap up today? I mean, I shot my wad with my apology.
It's great. I'm happy you came around on the movie, and we still got a good debate in with Avatar versus the Batman. So maybe that'll have to be the next special you guys do.
No, we're not making any more promises. We should probably take this time to say we have completed our contractual obligations to the listening audience. We've made. Do you all remember any other specials that we had promised, or was this the last of the specials?
I didn't even remember this promise.
The Prince album special promise. The Michael comes back to do Exorcist III versus Hereditary promise. The road trip was not even a promise. That was just a bonus. And then the Intruder drum sound. I would try to find an email where I listed all our promises, but
I thought there was a promise that we were going to watch all of the Pink Panther films with.
That's a good one.
Because William Peter Blatty, that was the thing. Is I found out that William Peter Blatty co-wrote A Shot in the Dark, which is the second.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was like, what?
Well, thank you for letting me be part of this special promise. I really appreciate being here.
Michael, is there anything you'd like to plug? We don't really do plugs on the show, but since you are a guest, we'll let you do whatever you'd like.
Yeah, check out my other two podcasts, Bigfoot Collectors Club, every Wednesday. And then I have another show that we talk about spooky paranormal stuff. And then Slate Your Name, where I talk to other actors, mostly actors in Hollywood, about working in the business. We just finished season 2 of that. That's a real easy listen. There's only about 25 episodes.
And I'm a huge fan of Slate Your Name. I got into it about 3-4 weeks ago and kind of blew through the whole thing. So much better than WTF. It is delightful.
Well,
so if you like WTF type interview podcasts, check it out.
Thanks.
Any last words, Jim, before our clock times out on us? You've got 30 seconds.
Check out The Changeling. I forgot about that. The other George C. Scott movie is around the same, 1980.
Yeah, better horror movie.
There you go. Lost and Found and Rewound is fully funded by Lost and Found and Rewound Foundation funds. Lost and Found and Rewound does not use crowdfunding because our listeners have better things to do with their funding. There's no need to post reviews of Lost and Found and Rewound because our listeners have more valuable things to do with their time. In all sincerity, thank you for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it.
Lotus Pod.